Halloween, October the 31st, All Hallows Eve, Samhain, whatever you call it. It's that one night of the year where the veil between the lands of the living and the dead is lifted, and the spirits of the long dead once again walk the earth. Once a pagan festival of offerings and sacrifice to appease the displaced spirits of old, it's now mostly an excuse to wear a Jimmy Savile costume, get heroically sloshed, and end up a vomit-smeared wreck before midnight. Or an excuse to trot out a video covering a tenuously Halloween-related game for your amusement. So, bolt the doors, lock your windows, and just leave that bowl of candy on the doorstep so the trick-or-treaters don't have to knock, and enjoy another obligatory Halloween special. This is Decap Attack, developed by Vic Tokai, released in America in September of 1991 for the Sega Genesis, followed by a European Mega Drive release in the November of the same year. It didn't retail in Japan, at least not in the same form, but I'll get to that, don't worry. It's a macabre and manic platform game in which you play as Chuck D. Head, a reanimated, mummified corpse, and the creation of one imaginatively named deranged scientist, Frankenstein. Now, Chuck, a poor, wretched, eldritch abomination, is tragically sans head, but more horrifyingly, his face is instead grafted onto his chest. However, despite all appearances, Chuck was in fact created with a surprisingly benevolent purpose. You see, it turns out that a demon from the underworld, a certain Max Decap, see what they did there, has designs on conquering the world above ground and has brought his army of monster minions with him to do it. He's already succeeded in breaking the inexplicably body-shaped world up into several pieces, and now it's up to you, Chuck, to venture out and put everything right by vanquishing Max Decap and somehow putting the world back together again. The gameplay is exactly as you'd expect for an early 90s Sega platformer. There are 7 levels in the game, each represented by an environmentally distinct island, and each with a pun-tastic anatomical name. Abdomain Land, Elbow Island. Each island is split into 3 distinct acts. The first 2 in each are standard, survive your way to the exit. The third act demands more exploration, as you need to find a hidden item that will allow you to exit the level, but not before beating the obligatory end-of-level guardian. In between stages, any coins that you collected on the way can be wagered in a bonus stage for power-ups and extra lives. Chuck runs around the levels, skittering about like he's on ice skates, making platforming trickier than you'd expect, although his airwalk, achieved by rapidly tapping the jump button while airborne, helps to get across treacherous gaps. The practical upshot of this is that you can float over large swathes of a level in one go, although this usually puts you in greater peril as you then fall into the unknown. Chuck's basic attack uses his Cronenbergian horror of an abdomen, as you see, hitting the punch button allows him to smash enemies in the face with his face. He can also stomp on them, like Mario, except in Chuck's case it takes repeated blows for them to actually stay dead. Smashing open statues reveals power-ups that can be used by accessing a subscreen. Chuck can increase his attack, jump, destroy enemies on the screen, or use a protective spell recommended for the bosses. He can also equip himself with a skull too. Now this is useful because not only can Chuck wear it on his shoulders in lieu of his own bonce, no doubt assuaging any deep-seated self-image problems that might arise from being headless, but he can also fling said skull for a deadly attack that reaches further than his own— wait, oh, I get it now. Chuck D. Head, because he chucks his head. That's just too clever for me. Even better, the skull deals damage on its way back to Chuck's waiting shoulders. But if you take a hit, then Chuck loses his cranial cudgel, c'est la vie. On the subject of health then, well, Chuck starts the game out with 2 or 3 hearts depending on what you choose in the pre-game option screen. Each heart is good for a couple of hits, giving you adequate bites of the cherry in each of your 3 initial lives. But those aren't cutesy, cartoony emoji hearts, no. their realistic disembodied hearts hideously beating away. It's odd that they went for anatomically accurate hearts, when the Heart Island, hilariously called Pumpington, is shaped like a cartoon heart. Whatever. You can find more hearts to refill your health by breaking open those statues as mentioned before, or, and don't ask me why these are even in the game, by plonking yourself directly on top of one of these bendy pole things. I think they're supposed to catapult you to hard to reach places, but I've never for the life of me figured out how to actually get a good momentum on one. And that's about it for a little over 7 3-act stages until you face off with the titular antagonist, Max Decap. If you beat him in a moderately challenging final fight, you're treated to a closing cutscene whereby Chuck staggers back to Frankenstein Mansion in a state of near total exhaustion and collapses at the door. The Doctor and his assistant Igor, they really went all out with the names in this, didn't they, compensates Chuck's deeds with the gift of a brand new head. Just don't ask where they got it, alright? Decap is grotesque and silly fun, with an anarchic and wicked sense of humour. However, the gameplay is disappointingly routine and quickly becomes tedious across the stages, and it's tricky if you don't have the patience. But the colourful, pulpy comic book style graphics are great, capturing the offbeat atmosphere perfectly, while the music does a decent job setting the appropriate tone for each of the tonally distinct levels. To some of you, particularly those who grew up with a SEGA Master System, Decap Attack might remind you of another game, and that game would be 1989's Psycho Fox. It's no coincidence though, both games were developed by Vic Tokai, so it's no real surprise that they share much in common, and that includes the weird springy pole things. Seriously, what are they about? You've got your punching and ground pound attacks, and the slippery physics and tricky platforming, and even a little helper to chuck around. Only this time, is that a crow, maybe? You've got your bonus levels, pretty much the same, and special items as well. Except this time they changed the player into a different animal for unique abilities. In many ways, Decap Attack is a spiritual successor to Psycho Fox. It's not the first time these gameplay elements had ever been seen, however, as 1988's Kid Cool for the NES demonstrates. Squint a little and it almost resembles Psycho Fox, with many of the same features as seen in the other two games. It wouldn't surprise you to hear that this was also a Vic Tokai game. I get the distinct impression that they only had one style of game and they just repeated it ad nauseum. Oh yeah, so remember earlier when I said Decap Attack didn't retail in Japan? Well, kinda. Over there it was better known as Magical Flying Hat Turbo Adventure, a 1990 licensed game based on a short-lived anime series that ran for 33 episodes between 1989 and 1990. And this was the game's original form. Only when it came time to port it over to the West, they couldn't secure the licensing rights, but let's be honest, I doubt anyone in Europe or the States at the time would have given much of a toss about a cutesy game version of a frankly obscure anime. So, ironically, the game was subjected to a Frankensteinian transformation all of its own, and was unleashed on the rest of the world, with everything bar the gameplay drastically altered. The characters, the story, the appearance and music, hell even the sound engine, were all completely rearranged into the horror comedy abomination you now see before you. Critical reception for Decap Attack was positive. Mega Magazine placed the game at number 22 in their top Mega Drive games of all time. Sega Force liked the graphics but not the gameplay. While Decap Attack never became a hit franchise for the ages, it made something of a minor mascot out of Chuck D. Head for Sega, mostly in the UK, where it was adapted into a comic strip in Fleetway's Sonic the Comic, first appearing in issue 10, published in October of 1993. It was crammed full of very zany, very British absurdist humour, and surprisingly copious amounts of bloody violence right from the off. The series ran for 5 years, making it the longest running non-Sonic strip in the comic's published lifespan. Decap Attack was last seen in 2018 on the SEGA Mega Drive Classics compilation for the PS4, Xbox and Nintendo Switch. And so that about wraps it up for now. Get it? Wraps it up? Because he's a mummy and he's wrapped in... forget it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I'd love to hear from you, so please like and comment below. Also, please consider subscribing so that you don't miss any future content. Thanks for watching, and however you celebrate, have a happy Halloween, and I hope to see you next time on Retro Respawn.